Hello and welcome to the European Parliament in Brussels for this new edition of Talking Europe. On Tuesday, Serbia transferred Europe's most wanted war crime suspect to the Hague Tribunal. Ratko Mladic is charged, among other things, with genocide for his role in the Srebrenica massacre in 1995. Now, Belgrade's failure to capture the former Bosnian Serb military leader was the main obstacle to Serbia's EU aspirations. Now, Serbian officials are making it clear they want to be rewarded. They want Serbia to receive candidate status before the end of the year. Is this going to happen? I'll put this question to my guest who will soon join me here on our set at the European Parliament. Also, don't miss the second part of Talking Europe. We'll bring you a close-up interview with Jerzy Buzek, the President of the European Parliament, as thousands of people demonstrate across Spain against the government's austerity measures and youth unemployment. I'll ask him what Europe can do. But first, will the EU doors open for Serbia following Mladic's arrest and transfer to the Hague Tribunal? Let me introduce you to our two guests today. To my left, Edward Kukan. Hello. You are a Slovak MEP from the European People's Party. You're also the chair of the delegation for relations with Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro and Kosovo. This is a region you know very well. You travel very often to Serbia, and you'll tell us, of course, what you think about the consequences of this arrest. Also on our set, Dusan Gajic. Hello.
Hello.
You're a Serbian journalist, international and European affairs correspondent with RTS TV, which is the Serbian national TV channel. Now, before we start our discussion, I'd like to take a listen at Boris Tadic. The Serbian president spoke to France 24 shortly after Mladic's arrest. My colleague Catherine Norris-Trent asked him whether his capture was the result of EU pressure. Let's see what he had to tell.
I'm asking you to understand our political philosophy, why we arrested Ratko Mladic and why we did it, why we have been implementing reforms in our country in the past few years. We are doing that because of ourselves, not because of European Union and the Hague Tribunal. We are doing that because of creating better atmosphere in the region and within Serbia. We are doing that because of implementing rule of law in our country, creating better conditions for foreign investors, for better living standards of our people. And that is exactly what we've been doing from the beginning of our political efforts. We didn't calculate about arresting Ratko Mladic. We've been working very hard on that issue from the beginning of term of this government.
Edward Kukan, Mr. Tadic is adamant the arrest is not a result of EU pressure. Serbia did it for itself, we understand. And yet many here in Brussels regard this arrest as a positive effect of the so-called soft power of Europe in the Balkans. Would you agree with that view?
I would agree with that it's the result of the soft power of the European Union. But I also agree with Boris Tadic because the European integration of Serbia is for Serbia, is for the people of Serbia. And what they are doing, it's not because it's asked or requested by Brussels. That would be a wrong perception. They are doing it because it's going to bring better life for them. Because if that would be only because of Brussels, then that would be wrong. So I understand him when he says that we are doing it for ourselves in order to get to the European Union. So it's a combination.
Dusan Gajic, still a lot of questions, of course. The arrest took place on the very day the EU foreign policy chief was visiting Belgrade. How is it perceived in Belgrade? You cover European affairs from here, but I know you know your country very well. How is it perceived over there?
Well, the timing itself, of course, sometimes it looks hard to believe that it was a pure coincidence that it happened exactly on the day. But on the day when
Happy coincidence.
Catherine Ashton came to Belgrade. But, you know, I believe, after all, that coincidence is not so important because in few weeks, hardly anyone will remember that Catherine Ashton was in Belgrade, but the consequence of Mladic's arrest will change many things in time to come. So I think, of course, visits of high officials from Europe are always important, but that was not probably the
defining
trigger for the arrest. Now, of course, we can have also other reservations about why it took so long for Mladic to be captured, and and what finally were the circumstances that allow that it happens now. Of course, we also see that in the end somehow the arrest, the capture looked relatively easy compared to the amount of time that it required and also the efforts that were at least claimed to be invested.
Leading some journalists in the region to say that maybe there was a deal between Mr. Mladic and the Serbian government. Is that something that you would believe?
I cannot say really. I think my personal conclusion, what I make out of this is that it's of course very good that it happened. It should have happened earlier. But if you put things into perspective, we cannot exactly take this government accountable and this president for the fact that he was on the run for the last 15 years, because they actually have means to deliver on that only in the relatively short period
couple of years.
time.
And it's true that Mr. Karadzic was arrested shortly after the government was formed. And this is precisely what officials within the government are saying. We have done a lot, we have delivered, now it's time to be rewarded. We want Serbia to be granted official candidate status before the end of the year. Is this feasible?
I think so. I'm expressing my personal opinion. Because when I look back to all the documents which we adopted in the European Parliament, each of them started with the sentence that without delivering Ratko Mladic to the Hague, it will not be possible for Serbia to move forward. Of course, there are other issues which should be addressed by the Serbian government to move forward, but this definitely is a very important step on the future European integration of Serbia. And many more reforms should be implemented, many more things should be done. But I think that the Serbian government is very much aware of the positive objective situation which Serbia is in now, and they want to make use best of it. So I think that the candidate country status is within the reach this year, before the end of this year.
Domestically, this would be very important for the Serbian government. The capture of Mladic has been hailed by observers as a very bold gesture on behalf of the government. There will be key elections next year. It's important for Mr. Tadic to put this on the table. Look, I have delivered. I now have candidate status.
Well, sure, this government was elected 3 years ago on clearly pro-European platform in a very delicate moment. You know, that was just a couple of months after Kosovo declared independence. And there on the table there were two options. We defend Kosovo, whatever that means, and basically it meant at that time turning back on Europe. And the second option was to take clear pro-European stand. 3 years later, it's important for the government also to show some concrete delivery. So there are stakes in this respect as well. And I think they definitely would like to show something concrete to the voters. Without any progress now, it would really lose credibility, I think.
And that would be bad news, I guess, for Brussels, because when you look at the polls, more nationalist parties are on the rise in Serbia. I guess for Brussels, it's important to have pro-European and rather liberal allies in Belgrade.
That's correct, because the EU membership is not for the government, but for the whole population of the countries. So it is only fair for Serbian government to expect that some kind of reward they would get back from the Brussels. And I think that in this situation, the European Union should be aware of its responsibility, because it's a partner in the future European road of Serbia.
Mr. Kukan said that every paper related to Serbia in the European Parliament started with a reference to Mladic and the fact that he has to be arrested and delivered to The Hague. But let's also remember now that many governments of member states, notably the Dutch government, were very explicit in emphasizing this condition. And I remember very well on a number of occasions the former foreign minister of Netherlands was saying that the full cooperation is necessary to move forward, and the best proof of full cooperation is Mladic on the plane to The Hague. Well, he is there now, so yes. I think that should definitely mean a lot to everybody. And if we continue in this direction, it's important for Serbia, I think, definitely, for government, for citizens, for many reasons, but it can also be seen as something important for Europe and enlargement policy.
And yet, I spoke earlier to Serbia's Deputy Prime Minister in charge of European integration. He was optimistic, but he says there's still a lot of changes that need to happen for Serbia to join the European Union. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
This is a big step forward, but I think things have changed, but not everything has changed. We still have to do a lot of reforms. We have to adopt, and that law is currently in our parliament, the new law on political party financing. We need to continue fighting against organized crime and corruption, where Serbia has been increasingly recognized as a leader in the region. And now our services will devote more resources to that end, now that the search for Mladic is finished. And we also need to do a lot more on other aspects, in particular the judicial system improvement and so forth. So that there's a lot of work ahead of us, but definitely those are things that are under our control. And therefore, the goal of Serbia, which is to reach by December of 2011 a candidate status and also have a date set to begin the formal negotiations to join the European Union, this is more than ever our goal.
Mr. Kukan, we heard Mr. Jelic list a whole series of issues that still need to be sorted out, but there is obviously the other big stumbling block. It's Kosovo. Now, Kosovo's sovereignty has been recognized by 22 EU member states. Serbia has vowed to never recognize Kosovo. How can you reconcile those 2 points of view, and how can you find some kind of arrangement that would both suit Brussels and Belgrade?
Well, that's a complicated issue, of course, but I think that the future of this issue will be looked upon from the Brussels, how the current dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina will continue. Because since the United Nations General Assembly resolution, I think that things started to change. And in that resolution, everybody, including the non-recognizers, said that they see the future of both partners, both Serbia and Kosovo, in the European Union. So the European Union future for both of the partners. The dialogue has started. There were 4 rounds already. We need some results. We cannot continue to say that that's fine, they are talking to each other. We need some.
This is a dialogue on a very technical level.
Very technical level, but we all hope that it will be start for getting something more substantial in the future. And I think that all 5 countries which do not recognize Kosovo are following this dialogue, and generally there is a development of the situation in the Balkans, of the situation of Serbia. So, and there is one principle which is still valid, that Serbia can be accepted as an EU member state without recognizing Kosovo. I think that it is valid. It is valid so far. So we can only hope for the best, that dialogue will help to resolve this difficult dilemma.
I remind our viewers that the 5 countries which haven't recognized Kosovo include, of course, your country, Slovakia, also Romania, Cyprus, Greece and Spain. Mr. Gajic, will Serbia be ready to recognize Kosovo in exchange for EU membership, or is that too much to ask?
Well, in exchange for EU membership, I don't think those 2 options are on the table, in fact. As long as there are at least 5 countries that don't recognize Kosovo, I don't think that Serbia will be confronted with that dilemma. And if you ask politicians in Serbia, they would, of course, say no. But to be honest, they also recognize the fact that they cannot import that problem in Europe. So the understanding that some kind of settlement with Kosovo or some modus of coexistence needs to be found that exists there. Now, the dialogue which is now ongoing is not going that far, but it's already very good that it started, that without big political declarations they sit around the same table. That's almost historical. And the only fact that they are doing that, and then it would be good if on some of the very concrete practical issues concerning everyday life they can produce some results. Of course, it would be now a bit dangerous to say if Serbia wants to be a candidate, there should be a result in that dialogue, because it doesn't depend only on Serbia. So it's not only Serbia that should be interested in achieving results.
Mr. Kukan, very briefly, there seems to be what some call enlargement fatigue in certain member states, a reluctance to accept new members. How serious are the 27 EU member states when it comes to EU enlargement to the Western Balkans?
The situation in different countries is different. It's difficult to say that they are all enthusiastic for enlargement, but I think that generally to think about the Europe whole and united, it's not possible without inclusion of the Western Balkans. It's part of the Europe. So I reject that emphasis on the enlargement fatigue. Of course, it's part of the internal political situation. There will be presidential elections in France, in some other countries. Enlargement will be part of it. But I think majority of the countries want the EU enlargement, and definitely I think that is the only future for Europe.
The future of Europe 20 years after the start of a terrible war in the region. Edward Kukan and Dusan Gage, thank you very much for taking part in this edition of Talking Europe. Thank you for watching the first part of our program. Now we'll return after the news break. We'll bring you a close-up interview with Jerzy Buzek, the President of the European Parliament. So please stay with us.